On today's episode, we're going to be focusing on 19th century high voice, specifically the performance practice shift of coloratura sopranos from the end of the classical era to the dramatic sopranos of the Romantic era, and how this shift was led by freedom of expression rather than composers fitting strict societal norms and outlines. Before we dive into our topic, we need to touch base on some important terminology. First off, we have coloratura, which is the extreme ornamentation of music through vocal runs, leaps, or trills. Next, we have virtuoso, which is a highly skilled person in regards to the performance practice of the time. Now that we've had our little vocab lesson, let's cover the vocal practices of the classical era. We're definitely going to need some background. The classical era spanned from 1750 to 1820, which led into the Romantic era. In the classical era, composers wrote music that tended to submit to public expectations with clear melodic lines and virtuosic singers. They were known for their light tone and technical precision. Vocal music tended to lack emotionally driven text. It focused on precise notes and rhythms, as well as a clear tonality. However, towards the end of the classical era, composers began to utilize the upper range of their sopranos. They really hadn't been doing this before. This gave us coloratura sopranos, who performed technically challenging lines in their upper range. This started the segue into the performance practices of the Romantic era. But it wasn't as smooth as that. Romanticism was a movement that caused art, literature, and society to focus on individuality and emotional freedom. This movement compelled artists of all types to create based off their emotions and inspiration, rather than form and expectation. An example of a composer who embraced Romanticism is Wagner. As society began to value emotion and individuality in art, audiences and composers began to kind of bore of coloratura sopranos, who just showcased their technique. They needed more. This led to sopranos such as Anna Milder to be praised for their expressive tonality rather than vocal technique. And as more roles were written for expressive performers such as Milder, dramatic works began to meld with extreme vocal techniques required by coloratura. And we see compositions that demand a mix of these, giving us dramatic coloratura, which really showcases all of the emotions behind the text, but it's still extremely vocally challenging. A good example of this would be Wagner's Rheinsee. I'm going to butcher this pronunciation. I'm not German, but I'm going to try my best. In specifically the piece Gerechte Gott so ist entscheiden schon. Hopefully that was close. But anyway, dramatic coloratura created a demand for power, which increased around the mid-19th century as concert halls and opera houses expanded, as well as large orchestration. With this, vocal power and volume was required to cut through the orchestration and reach the back of the house. So we now need more vocal power rather than ornamentation, as ornamentation in a room that large and orchestration that heavy is just lost. Virtuosic sopranos were now the ones who had extreme tonal control while performing powerful dramatic lines, rather than displaying agility and technical challenge. We can clearly see the shift in A Debt is Due from Das Rheingold by Wagner. In compositions like these, we see melodies compelled by text and the emotion in the text rather than vocal gymnastics. And I think right there that shows clearly the difference between early Romantic era and mid-Romantic to classical. And in case you need the read, because I know it is a lot to take in, that's about 70 years of music in a short presentation. So I'll summarize. The shift of the soprano performance practice between the classical era and Romantic is best displayed by more expressive performances, as well as less ornamentation by the singers, allowing for a more powerful and dramatic tone and overall emotional performance. Here are my sources, in case you want to do more research of your own. Thanks.